Hello, and today's lecture is about what to do and not to do in photojournalism reporting. Basically, what you should turn in for this class and what you shouldn't turn in for this class. First of all, do not turn in the following. Do not turn in any photos that are out of focus. Now, I do know with some photos, due to limitations with cameras and action being in the photo, that there's going to be some motion blur. If it's not too distracting, it might be acceptable to turn in a photo with some action blur. But being out of focus is different. If the photo is not in focus, the part of the photo that you want the viewer to be looking at is blurry, that's not a good photo. It doesn't tell an effective story. It interferes with the storytelling ability of that photo. So please don't turn that in. Also, do not turn in pictures of yourself. Um, it calls to mind that you may not have taken the picture if you're in the picture. The person who is taking the picture is usually the person pressing the shutter. And if you're in the photo, I'm thinking you're not in, or you're not, if you're in the photo, you're not the one pressing the shutter. Someone else has done your work for you. And of course, that brings up the idea of the selfie. There really is no reason for selfies in photojournalism. I also know you love your pets, but the definition of photojournalism reporting is taking pictures of people doing things from interesting angles. Or it might even be taking pictures of interesting people doing interesting things from interesting angles. Notice at no time did I say taking pictures of animals, taking pictures of pets, taking pictures of fur babies. That is really not photojournalism, unless the story that you're illustrating happens to be about that animal. I know your pets are lovely, they're part of your family, but in this course, please do not turn in any photos of your pets. Also, don't take any pictures of wildlife and turn them in. I know that each campus seems to think that their squirrels are different and are more interesting. They're not, they're just squirrels on campus. So refrain from taking pictures of wildlife and then turning them in as your photo assignment. I do know that there's geese on this campus, I've heard, so I don't need any more pictures of them. Oh, jumping ahead a little bit. Also, do not take any photos of people on train tracks. Go back to my example here. And yes, they're very good for, say, a proposal or engagement photo or a senior photo. And I understand the perspective that the tracks make very interesting eye lines. But for the most part, that's not photojournalism. It's a cliche. And we want to battle cliches during this course. Now, there are times when I'm going to tell you that a cliche actually kind of works. But in this case, this does not work. Do not take or submit any photos without a complete cut line. When you turn in cut lines, I would like them to be in Microsoft Word format. And the cut line should identify everyone in the photo and what is going on in the photo, and maybe some additional information. The next lecture will be about cut lines and cameras, so I'll give you more information there. But even though a photo should be able to stand by itself and tell a story without a cut line is still necessary. Alright, there's some cliche poses out there, especially on Instagram and Facebook, and I call them the sorority pose, the Charlie's Angels pose, or the gangsta pose. And these are illustrated here, at least here's the sorority pose. This is a pose that obviously was meant to objectify women by making them bend over. Don't objectify people in your photos, and don't take photos of people doing this and stop them when they think that this is a good photo pose. It is not. Also, Charlie's Angels. Charlie's Angels hasn't been relevant since the 1970s when Farrah Fawcett was a Charlie's Angel. And doing this pose, I'm pretty sure that people don't know where it even came from in the first place. But the reboots have failed, both of them. Charlie's Angels is not relevant, so don't take those photos. And also, just the idea of the peace sign or hand symbols. I don't know why people think that this is cute, this is interesting. It isn't, but it has become so rampant um, in photography that it's almost become a symbol for photography. You can go to third world countries, not making this up, and point a camera towards someone and they'll immediately flash you the peace sign. It has become the symbol. It's what you do when someone takes a photo of you. I don't know where it comes from, but we want people doing what they do naturally, kind of candid pictures. And any pose picture, unless it's specific to what you're trying to achieve with your storytelling, don't do it. It's a cliche, and my example here, with except a section of the grandma on the left, I don't think anyone in there is part of the game. Photos of food. This has become popular now that it doesn't cost a lot of money to develop film in order to take photos of something. But back when we had to develop film, we didn't take photos of our food. Now, of course, there are exceptions to this when you are actually doing food photography, and there are certain ways to go about doing that, but that is beyond the extent of this course, and still life is more of photography for art's sake rather than photography for journalism's sake or for storytelling's sake. So let's stay away from photos of food, and definitely photos of anyone making a heart out of their hands. If you're going to be doing the photo with the heart made out of your hand, notice that photo in the bottom there, at least center the sunset. But once again, overused, cliched. I thought it was interesting the first couple of times I saw it. The trillionth time I saw it didn't add to the story. So please don't turn that in. Alright. Other things not to turn in. There will be times when you're going to be taking pictures of people who are subject of a story. And these people might be, say, a professor. So you go to the professor's office and they're sitting behind the desk, so you take a picture of them sitting behind the desk, talking on the phone, reading a book. Most of the times I know those are posed photos because you didn't just randomly come into a professor's office and they just happen to be talking on the phone or reading the book that they wrote. Try not to set up photos like that. Get the person up and take pictures of what they do. If they're a professor, they will be professing. If they are a secretary, they will be helping people. If they are who would be answering a phone? The person who answers, a receptionist. There we go. But wait until they move around and do something. Remember, our definition is people doing things, not necessarily posing with a phone in their hands. And it does look fake. It really does. Look at these people here. I do know these are stock photos, so they're supposed to be kind of generic looking. But hardly ever does someone just kind of stare off into the distance with this, gaze of intellectualism while sitting behind their computer. So try to find interesting angles, interactivity, action, rather than bland, cliche poses like this. Photos of buildings, unless the story that you're illustrating is about a building. Buildings and inanimate objects are inherently dull. We're social people. We want to see pictures of people. We don't want to see pictures of just objects. For the most part, I've already mentioned that pose photos are kind of frowned upon in photojournalism because it's, to borrow a term that I've heard somewhere, something called fake news. Yeah, try not to set up the news, set up the photo, pose the photo, make something that wouldn't naturally happen just for the sake of taking the photo. Baby bump photos. Why would I be against? Oh, thumbs up. I haven't gotten to that one yet. Why would I be against baby bump photos? Um, I guess it tells a story, but this is what happens when women have a baby. They have a swollen stomach. It's not telling a story. Thumbs up photos. Just kind of showed you a preview of that for a second. Yeah, overdone, cliched. Find a different way to tell your story other than the thumbs up photo. Two last things on what not to do. Nudes. Not interested. And if you're wondering, has this happened in this course in the past? Yes, it has. Please don't. And iPhoto photos. In the next lecture, when I talk about cameras, I will say that the best camera that you can have is the camera that's with you. When an event happens, when a story needs to be illustrated, whatever camera you have is going to be your best camera. Phones you wish you had, phones that you wish you had, and cameras that you wish you had aren't going to help you in that situation. I do strongly suggest avoiding iPhone or any smartphone photos. My current phone has 3 different lenses on it, but they're still the size of the back of a pencil eraser. That's a very small amount of space allowing in light to take a photo. And that's what photography is. The word photography means writing with light. So the more light you have, the better the photo. iPhones, that opening for the lens, just not big enough. So try to use a camera that has a lens that can let in a lot of light. So I'm not going to say completely don't turn in iPhone or smartphone photos. Avoid it if you can. You're just going to be happier with your photo project. What to do? Well, definitely have a photo that tells a story. And I did mention that people doing things, doing different activities, interesting activities, will tell a story just by looking at them. They say a picture's worth 1,000 words. Well, yes, they are worth 1,000 words. Some photos tell a better story, a more interesting story than others. So think as you are shooting, what story does this photo tell? Every photo that you turn in should have a clear center of interest. That's one of the points on the rubrics for each of the assignments that I will be having is 1, does it tell a story? 2, do you have a cut line? 3, does it have a clear center of interest? You don't necessarily have to compose the photo in the viewfinder with a clear center of interest when you're shooting. My advice is just shoot away. But you can crop photos. You can use Photoshop to bring out the center of interest. But there is something to a photographer that takes the time, has the eye, knows what they're shooting, and even while they're shooting, they're thinking about what is the clear center of interest? What should the viewer first look at when this photo tells them the story that they wish to be telling? Always be careful what's going on in the background, photo bombs, things that might be distraction to the center of interest, and also objects coming out of people's heads. So that's a weird one. But if you put someone up against a wall to say take a mug shot of them, and behind them was some wood work from the wall, and there just looks like there's a line coming out of their head. It's going to look like they're a marionette, or something drawing out of their head. So try to avoid that. Look at what's in the background. Be conscious of that as you're taking photos, and take lots of photos. Like I just said, just shoot. This past summer, I was given an assignment, and each day I would go out and shoot at about a dozen different locations. And at each location, I was taking hundreds of pictures. So at the end of the day, when I submitted the photos for that day, I had to go through hundreds of photos, and I only picked out, say, 5 from each location, maybe even less. So it's easier to pick and choose good photos from a variety of choices than only having 1 or 2 photos to choose from. With digital photography, you don't have to buy more film, but even in the days of film photography, we were shooting rolls and rolls of film. That's why we would bring multiple cameras with us, lots of film with us, so we could take lots and lots of photos. With digital photography, keep taking photos. Robert Capra once said, if your photo isn't good enough, you weren't close enough. So definitely get closer when you're taking photos. That could be physically closer. It might be using a telephoto lens. But really get in and show me what you want me to see of this interesting event. And you see that I put down here, take photos of people, preferably doing something. It gets back to our definition of photojournalism. Also trying different angles. That's what's going to make a photo compelling. If we see the same thing taken over and over again from the same angle, from the same perspective, it's not going to draw interest. A different angle, on the other hand, might actually make that photo compelling. When you do shoot an event, make sure you're there early, perhaps before the event starts, and definitely stay late. This is a criticism usually given to local news, that they go in, they get their one shot, they get out. Well, my advice is be there early, stay late, shoot everything, and you'll never know where the story is coming from. Maybe it was the real story happened before the event, happened after the event. It's the whole event. So you won't be able to have those photos if you're not there. And for the most part, journalists should always show up early and stay late. Always bring some extra batteries and memory cards with you. Equipment fails, batteries go dead, memory cards don't work. Having backups will always save you. Usually don't run into the problem of fingers in the photos anymore, since we don't use point and shoot cameras as much as we used to. But sometimes with your smartphone, your finger might get in the way. So just be conscious of knowing what you're doing when you're taking a photo. One of the problems I have is sometimes when I put my camera in portrait mode, I'll actually put my hand in front of a flash. So I was wondering why I kept getting these weird half bright, half dark photos until I realized, yeah, it was me. My hand was in the way of the flash. And same thing with having it in front of the lens. Not a good thing. Get yourself a good camera. Like I said, an iPhone will work. It'll be good if that's the only camera you have. But investing in a good digital single lens reflex camera, a DSLR, will pay dividends in the long run. You should always meet deadlines in journalism. You should definitely learn your camera. So if you want to be able to set f-stops, change lenses, do shutter speed, you should know how to do that with your camera. Every camera is different. So read that manual, go online, look at tutorials for it, be very familiar with your camera or cameras. For this course, and if you pursue photojournalism in the future or just journalism in general, always take your camera with you. One of the nice things about having a smartphone is that you usually have a camera with you. But definitely, if you have a job that uses photos to tell stories, take your camera with you everywhere you go. Keep a photo diary, and we don't really do that anymore because of computers and digital photography, but if you go out to shoot something, write down what camera you used, what lens you used, what your aperture was, what your shutter speed was, what your ISO was. So when you see a good picture, you can always go back and say, oh, I used this lens with this shutter speed, and that seems to work very well in this environment. Say, the gym that I use out east. The lighting in there is terrible, but if you found a way to set up your camera to take really good pictures in there, it would be nice to be able to go back to your photo diary to say, oh, this is how I set it up, this seems to work. If you can, as I mentioned before, try to frame the shot in the viewfinder, but don't worry about it too much. When in doubt, shoot. You can always crop to the clear center of interest later. So that's what to do and what not to do in this course, and I'm excited to see what you do shoot for me.